In the name of Allah, we will discuss the ascending tracts today. There are three basic types of ascending tracts, of course, the sensory pathways, hence the name. Number one, the dorsal column. Number two is the spinothalamic, and the third variety is spinocerebellar tract or system. Now, the spinocerebellar pathways, which is our today's topic, they are of three main variety: the anterior, posterior, and cuneo-cerebellar tracts. What they do, they are supposed to take proprioceptive information towards your cerebellum so that your body works smoothly and coordinate accordingly all the information. In this very diagram, the three tracts are being shown: the anterior or ventral spinocerebellar tract in the blue color line, and then you observe the dorsal spinocerebellar tract in red line, and of course the green line is showing the cuneo-cerebellar tract or fibers reaching towards your cerebellum. And you can well imagine that among these three, the anterior one is going to be a crossed collection of fibers, but rest of the two, the dorsal, spinocerebellar, and cuneo-cerebellar, they remain uncrossed. But let me tell you that minority of the fibers among the anterior spinocerebellar, they do cross as well. Here in this picture, you can see the anterior spinocerebellar tract. So we will start it from the receptor organ, which you can see being shown in the lower limb, the Golgi tendon organ, and of course the muscle spindle, the joint, receptor. You can see from all these receptors, the information or fibers are going towards the or through the spinal nerve and reach the dorsal root ganglion. And here is the place from where the first order neuron takes the information and reaches towards your spinal cord, right? And this dorsal root ganglion carrying the first order neuron, they enter into this gray matter and ends up here. And from here, let me mark that there is the start of second order neuron, and from where it gets started, it starts from the thoracic nucleus or Clark's column. This is called as area the Clark's column, and from here you can well imagine that the fibers are going to be crossed and reaches towards the white matter, and then they have to ascend upwards as anterior spinocerebellar tract. Then they passes through medulla, then the pons, and let me show you that finally they are supposed to reach where, like let me mark them in the yes, they are supposed to pass through the superior cerebellar peduncle and reaches the cerebellum. And here in this picture, we can learn about the posterior or dorsal spinocerebellar tract. Again, the receptors, they lie in the same place, and the information is being gathered from the muscle spindle, the Golgi tendon organ, and the joint receptors. And the fibers are now entering through the spinal nerve into the dorsal root ganglion, the first order neuron. Then they reaches towards your spinal cord, the posterior gray column. Of course, again the Clark's column. Let me mark it. This is the area for this nucleus, and from here the fibers move upwards without crossing. So you can observe that from here they are coming an uncrossed way, they are ascending upwards, and this tract is the posterior spinocerebellar tract, right? And now you can see they have to ascend through finally into the inferior cerebellar peduncle, and then they will join your cerebellum, right? And they are taking information from your lower limb and the trunk. Now you can see that there is another type of this cuneo-cerebellar tract, which gathers information from your upper limb and the thorax, and again the receptors are the muscle spindles, joint receptors, etc. And you can see the fibers running in the spinal nerve and again reaching the dorsal root ganglion as first order neuron. Then it reaches the area of the spinal cord. Again, this is the posterior gray column, and from here they have to ascend upwards, and they are supposed to get origin from the nucleus cuneatus that lies in the medulla oblongata, informing the fasciculus cuneatus, and reaches upwards as a cuneo-cerebellar tract. Let me show you that they are supposed to ascend via accessory cuneatus nucleus and forming the cuneo-cerebellar tract and reaches the cerebellum, right? And here you can see this is the cut section showing the gray matter of the cerebellum, And you can recall the three layers. The top one, superior one, is the molecular layer, this one, and then comes the Purkinje cell layer, and finally the granular cell layer. And what I am gonna tell you that in this diagram, the fibers of the anterior, posterior, and cuneo-cerebellar, they reaches as mossy fibers and get entry into your granular layer. And finally, they also come in contact with the deeper nuclei of the cerebellum, right? Let me summarize again. Now you can see that the information are coming from the muscles. These are unconscious proprioceptive information. They are crossing, right, and are ascending upwards. You can see as anterior cuneo-cerebellar, and let me mark that they are supposed to ascend and finally reaching through the superior cerebellar peduncle. Then they will gather all the information towards your cerebellum, right? And this diagram is showing about the posterior spinocerebellar tract and the cuneo-cerebellar tract. They take information on the same side and collectively passing through the inferior cerebellar peduncle and reaches into your cerebellum, right? So we come across that the information from your muscles are reaching into your cerebellum and definitely receiving the feedback, and your cerebellum functions as a coordinating system or as a comparator and also communicates with that of your cerebral cortex, and definitely the feedback is coming back again towards your effector. And if there is the lesion of this cerebellum occurs, we can have so many abnormalities, and there will be the loss of coordination and smoothness of movements will no longer be there, right? And we can have then as a result hypotonia in the muscle, or we can expect the postural changes in the body, and ataxia means disturbance in voluntary movement in our body, and so many other abnormal reflexes we can detect in our body. Okay.